Rain tapped on the windows of James Whittaker's modest classroom in Leeds. The clock showed 3:48 p.m, nearly the end of the school day. A few students in the back row were doodling, half listening. James, a man in his early 40s with carefully combed hair and an air of quiet cynicism, stared at the last student trying to present her English assignment. She was new. Dark brown eyes, braided hair, thick accent. 11 years old, give or take. Her name, Amara, was written in neat cursive on her notebook. She stood in front of the class, small hands trembling as she read from her paper about what home means to me. Her voice was soft, trembled slightly, every syllable delivered with effort. English wasn't her first language, and it showed. When she mispronounced neighbourhood as neighbourhood, the class chuckled. James didn't correct them. In fact, he let the laughter hang for a few seconds longer than he should have, before raising a lazy hand. "Amara," he said with a smirk, "how many languages do you speak at home?" The room quieted. "Only Swahili and English," she whispered. He replied with mock curiosity, cocking an eyebrow. "It shows you're still adjusting. Let's try to sharpen that English a bit, shall we?" The room giggled again, and Amara's shoulders shrank. She sat down, her head lowered. James moved on, calling the next student, never noticing, or choosing not to notice, the ripple of shame and pain his words left behind. Years passed like dust collecting in corners. James quit teaching at 47, worn out and unfulfilled. The spark he'd once possessed for literature and helping kids had burned out years ago, replaced by middle-aged apathy and the gnawing sense that his best years were behind him. After a bitter divorce and a stint as an underpaid editor, James found himself back in classrooms, but not in front of them. He became a private English tutor for adults. The pay was better, schedule flexible, and frankly, he needed the money. One rainy Wednesday, an agency sent him to a local community centre near Bradford for a basic English literacy programme. Immigrants, working-class strugglers, and new arrivals sat on plastic chairs, notebooks in hand. James opened the attendance sheet and froze. Student name? Amara Juma. He blinked, uncertain. It couldn't be. Then he saw her. Older now, in her 20s. The braided hair remained, but her face held confidence, sharpness, and perhaps, yes, an exact recognition that pierced him across the room like a tightly drawn arrow. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She just stared, and for a second James felt something in his chest hollow and coil. Guilt. Shame. Recognition. She remembered. And from that moment, so did he. Amara never confronted James. Not directly, at least not at first. She showed up to class early, sat at the front, asked questions. She was brilliant, articulate, and purposeful. Her accent still present but strong and clear, made even more beautiful by her clarity and conviction. Each day she participated, James wrestled with memories. Her, mid-laughter, in that old classroom. Him, standing at the front, tired and small-minded, weaponizing words without second thought. He had no idea then what burdens she carried. The war-torn country she'd once fled, the family member she'd lost to border violence, the nights she went to bed learning English with an old radio under her pillow, hoping one day she'd be heard. Now here she was, speaking better than half of his clients. Not because of him, but in spite of him. One day after class, she stayed back. "You probably don't remember," she said calmly, packing her notes, "but when I was a child, my school had an English teacher who humiliated me in front of the class. Over my accent." James felt his throat tighten. I hated English for years," she continued, "but eventually I found writers like Maya Angelou and Chinua Achebe, writers who sounded like me." He nodded slowly. "You kept going." She nodded. "I had to." Then, a pause. "You helped me more than you think," she added, "by showing me the kind of voice I never wanted to be." With that, she left. James sat alone in the empty room, feeling every word curl inside like a burning truth. Redemption had no shortcuts. James tried to change after that. He still taught English, but now he listened more than he spoke. He practiced seeing the lives behind the eyes, the stories behind the imperfect grammar. He started volunteering, free tutoring for refugee women, asylum seekers, and kids who reminded him of Amara. He read the literature she loved, asked for her recommendations, even created a module titled Voices from Diasporas in her honour. One day, Amara walked into one of those volunteer programs, not as a student but as a guest speaker. She stood before the class of young, nervous learners and spoke with clarity, warmth, and fluent grace. "Don't be ashamed of your voice," she told them. "It carries your story, your survival. Make people listen." James watched quietly, tears forming. She had grown into the voice he'd once tried to quiet, and now she was helping others speak. After the session, James finally approached her. "Amara, I'm sorry for back then. I was a poor man, not just in spirit, but in courage." Her eyes softened just slightly. "We're all poor in something. The question is, do we stay that way?" Silence, then a shared, quiet smile. Forgiveness wasn't a thunderclap. Sometimes it was just space, created gently, deliberately, where two people could meet again as different versions of themselves. Years later, James wrote an essay. It was about his teaching days, his failures, and one student who taught him how to become a better man. He called it "The Day I Was Taught How to Listen." It reached a modest audience, teachers, writers, online forums, but one comment from a reader stood out more than any award. "You were my first English teacher. I remember that day. Thank you for remembering too, and for changing." It was from Amara. He printed out the comment, framed it above his desk, and spent the rest of his days teaching not just with knowledge, but with humility, heart, and careful humanity. Because once, he mocked a girl for how she spoke. Years later, she taught him what words could really mean.